I think it's a natural part of who I am, but I'm always aware. Let's be clear. I'm very image conscious, and I know that that's probably not the thing I should be saying. I worked in the entertainment field for a long time too, and so I know that it's the inappropriate way to say, but like I worked with wigs and stuff like that. There were such things as wig lines, and you don't want that hard line, and if you do, it'd be what we used to call clocked, like you could see it.
Welcome to HairPod, the podcast where you get to hear real people talk about their hair journeys. Hair loss happens to people at different times and for different reasons, so each story is just as unique as the next. I'm your host, Kevin Rolston, and each week I get to interview people from different walks of life who've all been through hair loss in some form or fashion and have found a way to get their confidence and their hair back. Our guest today is Christopher Erstner. He knows firsthand just how important it is to like what you see in the mirror, and he makes his living helping his own clients do just that. Christopher works in the beauty industry, manufacturing fragrances, makeup, and skincare to help people look and feel their best. But before he became the knowledgeable professional that he is now, he was just a kid at the end of high school starting to notice his own hair loss.
I would say probably like high school, right? So like towards the end of like senior year, maybe even junior, but you don't really notice it until somebody points it out.
And what was that first moment for you? Because I remember my very first moment where I realized I was losing my hair. Was there kind of a signature moment where you said, oh, wait, that doesn't look right?
I'd probably say more mid-20s. I'd say like 25, 26 years old. That was more of an issue for me. Because, you know, you can stand in front of the mirror, but you don't actually see what everybody else sees.
Yeah.
So kind of same way with like losing weight. I always find that by seeing pictures of yourself is really when you get to analyze it in a different way than when you're standing in front of a mirror. And so I think I can't remember a specific moment, but I'm almost certain it would have been probably in a picture.
Okay, so it started to creep in. You started to realize in your mid-20s, maybe around the age of 26, that you had some issues. Where were you then? What did you first consider that you were going to do about your hair loss and how you're going to deal with it?
Honestly, I did not really have any ideas of what to do. Of course, you know, you're in a much different financial position in your mid-20s than you are, you know, at 40. So, and, you know, technology has made things a little bit better in terms of spreading the message. So I don't think, and if there was, I didn't see anything that would have suggested or even, you know, like algorithmed me into like putting me into a category of being able to see what options were there. I mean, of course, you always heard about like hair plugs. You also like heard a lot of people, you know, with like the toupees. And there was always like this joke that was associated with it in the movies or in shows and stuff like that. So I don't think that was ever something that I would have even suggested for myself, because of course the last thing you want to be is the joke.
Yeah, well, especially with you're in a field of, you know, your image is everything, and you talk about the hair plugs, and my perception, you know, growing up with the hair plugs was we call it Barbie doll hair, you know, where you would have what would look like big old chunks of hair just coming out of holes in your head, and it was so
and
obvious,
so specific. Yeah.
Right, and everybody seemed to know that you had something done to your hair except for you. You were the one that you thought you were, you know, pulling the wool over the world's eyes, and they could completely see through it. And that's a really tough thing when you're saying, okay, I don't want to be a joke. I don't want to go down that path. So where do you even start when you realized in your mid-20s that you're starting to lose some hair and you needed a solution? The solutions that you thought you knew didn't sound very attractive to you at the time. So where did you even go to start off? And what was the first hair loss treatment you ever did?
Oh, geez. I would say probably Bosley, like back in the day. Like they have you convinced that you put this solution on your head and it's like miraculous. Like it's going to be like, was it Miracle Grow? And it doesn't. Especially in the business that I'm in when it comes to beauty and creating, shampoos and stuff are meant to wash off, right? So they don't really have a chance to penetrate. But you're not really thinking that unless you understand the science. And of course, back then that was not something that I even understood. But Yeah, like, so I think the first thing I did was like, I didn't want to be that guy that was like bozo, honestly, where it was just like hair and then, so I just shaved it off and then I got really
Oh, did you?
comfortable with wearing
Wow.
hats. Yeah.
Okay, so you went with no hair at all then. You decided to take the whole thing off.
Yeah, absolutely. I figured that if I wasn't going to be able to do it right or look right, I was just going to get rid of it. And so I own probably every single Coach hat that they've ever made. And I just kind of went along with that. Yeah.
How do you think that made you feel? Because I was almost there. That was the last step before I walked into Hair Club and got my system. Was I thought I was going to shave the whole thing. But then I started to realize, to me, I look 15 to 20 years older when I don't have hair. How do you feel like you looked without hair?
Same. I mean, of course, you keep it together with the hat, right? So you want to try to, keep it cool and fun with the hat. But there's only so much like you could do, like, like my sister's wedding. Like, I'm not going to wear a hat, walking her down the aisle. But like, I'm not going to lie, I would have totally done so if she would have let me. I'm not going. I sincerely would have done it.
She wasn't down for that, huh?
No, she wasn't about that life. But you do what you got to do.
It's interesting just how something like not being able to wear a hat to a wedding can lead us to bigger questions about how we want to be seen by others and how we can make our vision into a reality. Historically, it's been socially acceptable, even expected, for women to explore ways to change or to enhance their looks, while men, they don't have as many socially acceptable options. And it's not just about a hat or a hairline, but about how society views men and the relationship with their appearance. So I asked Christopher for his perspective on this.
Men do not have that space in the beauty world to have the ability to say, I don't like this and I'd like to change it without having some type of like Joan Rivers complex, like, with like the plastic surgery. Well, maybe she went a little too far, but that's what she did for herself. We should let people alone. Men are just, and even she gets let off the hook and you got Kenny Rogers situation where it's like, oh my God, it's a little too much. And then you get talked about forever and your legacy is, to be an am, you know what I mean? So you kind of have to be cognizant of that. But I think that it's getting better. Obviously, social media, and there's so many forms of social media now that you really can't get away from the algorithm. And so at some point, you're going to come across it if it's something that you're looking for.
Yeah, tell me a little bit about, because, I think that is a big hang up for a lot of guys. It seems like in our society, it's much more acceptable, or at least it was, that women would go out and seek beauty type treatments. But men, we take whatever life gives us and we don't really do that kind of stuff. And you talk about your own struggles with that, because I think you have to come to a place where you get comfortable. And now I have no problem talking about anything that I've done with Hair Club, very open about it. But it probably was something that either happened in society or my age. What do you think it was for you? Is it something that you get more comfortable with as you get older? Or do you think that societal perceptions about men and hair loss and the treatments that they have are different?
I don't think that the society has changed on hair loss in regards to like the sexual capability or compatibility really of what men are to women, right? So like, it's just, and so I think that's part of the issues that men have is like, I want to be, attractive and I want people attracted to me. And then, we make the world go round, right? But in terms of like society changing their ideas about that, it really hasn't changed because, at least from my perspective, you have, our parents and then their parents. Men were they kind of have the world on a string, right? And women were supposed to be like very well kept and you got to wait for your husband to come home. So you have that very chauvinistic kind of attitude that they don't realize was chauvinistic until years later. And those things have changed since, the women's movement in the 70s. And then the 80s were just like, one big party. And then the 90s is, I think, what people started understanding, like, I'd like to look a certain way. And given the room to do so, and then you got to 2000s where things are just not the same anymore. And then pre-COVID, or what is it, post-COVID now, I think that the world completely changed in a different way. And people are just like, you know what, I'm just going to live life the way I want to live. And if that means that I have to admit to one or two things. I am going to seek help for hair loss or I'm not. It's one or the other. I got to be me. And I think that more younger men are certainly happier with the options than I think that we were when we were kids, for sure.
Yeah, no doubt. I think you touched on something brilliant, and it probably really has been since COVID. There's been a new focus on your mental health and just how important and how you really have to prioritize that. Speak to your own mental health, when you have hair and when you don't, because I can tell you for me with confidence in the way that I feel, when I have my unit with Hair Club, I feel so much better with hair than I do without. How would you speak to your own mental health and how you are with and without hair?
Same. I would probably agree with you almost 100% on that. Absolutely. It's the one thing I will not compromise on. If everything failed around me, it would be one of those things that I would absolutely get a second job for, because it has everything to do with my self-confidence. It's when I can look in the mirror and feel good about myself. When I'm out and about, I can feel good of myself. But I will say in the beginning, it was kind of tough, right? It was like this weird transition of having to learn how to style again. And
yeah, right.
Those were it was a little bit more difficult than I would have had given it credit for sure. But, and that's still kind of fun. I still really enjoy doing that because I don't take it for granted.
For Christopher, having the right hair loss solution is definitely a must. It just goes to show you that the transformation people experience when they get their hair back is more than just physical. A mental shift happens when people feel like their appearance matches the vision they have for how they want other people to see them. But getting to that point can sometimes take a little trial and error. So I want to know more about the journey Christopher took to find his solution with Hair Club.
I was doing PRP treatments.
Tell me about the PRP for people that don't know. What is the PRP?
It's hell on earth. I think that's what it stands for. It's awful. Here, I don't know what it actually stands for, but it's a fairly new procedure that they came out with a few years ago. And what they essentially, the science behind it is stem cell regrowth. And so they would pull blood and then they would get stem cells and then they would inject it into your skull, essentially. And that was it was horrifying. I would rather be bald. That's how bad.
Really?
It was a lot.
It was just bad. Pain. It was time. It was cost. It was all the above.
Well, it's very expensive, but people forget how many nerve endings you have in your head. And there isn't a lot of fatty tissue between your skull and the skin. So it was awful. That's all I could say. So I think it was that kind of was like, okay, well, obviously I'm on this, I'm clearly trying to find something. Yeah. And so therapy just wasn't working. It just was not doing it for me. I mean, I'm sure if I had kept up on it, it may have, but I wasn't willing to try to figure it out. So I think I just started Googling, honest to God. Yeah. And it's what came up. And then, obviously, I think Facebook and all the rest of them kind of figure out what you're up to in terms of the Google algorithm and stuff. And so then you started seeing the ads. And honestly, it was one of the very first things that I wanted to know. I was okay, I've seen this before because I had seen it. And not specifically with Hair Club, but just, online or whatever. And I think that what I wanted to know, my first question was always about money. Let's be clear. I'm in business. So it's always about what that bottom line looks like. And honestly, I didn't know how often is it swapped out? I didn't know any of that. In fact, I figured, why not just sew it in? What are you going to do?
Right. It's permanent. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so I think that's how it came about. And then I just made an appointment.
Years later, Christopher is still rocking his hair system. Now, I've had my system for about 6 years now, and it's just become a part of me. It's not even something I ever think about now. And I couldn't imagine looking in the mirror without it. It would not be good. So I was interested to hear whether his experience was anything like mine.
I think it's a natural part of who I am, but I'm always aware. Let's be clear. I'm very image conscious, and I know that that's probably not the thing I should be saying.
No, I want honesty. Mm-hmm.
I worked in the entertainment field for a long time too, and so I know that it's the inappropriate way to say, but I worked with wigs and stuff like that, and so there were such things as wig lines, and you don't want that hard line. And if you do, it could be what we used to call clocked, like you could see it, And so I think that was always and is always going to be one of the things that I will watch out for. But like, I don't know if I'm the normal person, right, in that regard. I think that I would say 99.99% of people would never know.
How often do you tell people that you do have a hair system, and how do you deal with that? Are you still self-conscious about it?
I don't know if I'm self-conscious. Well, I take that back. I think that's, yeah, for sure. I'm certainly self-conscious about it. Why is that? Because I would rather not have to, right? So like, I would rather have my own like head of hair, and I'm bitter at my mother still for being in a family with bald head guys. Like, what can I say? But like, of course I would love to have like my own. However, that's not what's up. And so I do tell people, but I don't tell people to be like, hey, by the way, I'm not going to. And unless it was to become a question, because I was photographed a lot before, and there's videos online of me without hair, like I had to be, honest with it. I've had like some work done to my face, for example, right? So I've had like Botox and fillers and the whole 9 yards. And I would have women that would come see me and they would say, well, you look extraordinary and this and that. And I immediately would squash that, because what I didn't want people to think that this was natural. Okay. So like, I didn't want to be this like weird standard of like, this is the magazine and you have to look like that. And so I wanted to be clear, like, this is what makes me happy. I only do it for myself, but just know that all this took work, I didn't wake up like this, And so I feel the same way when it came to guys. So it's weird because I would see a lot of husbands with wives, right? And in the beauty with makeup and so on and so forth. And it also gave me a great opportunity to talk to men about that. And men are so self-conscious, way more than I think they're ever going to be given credit for. And when you have somebody that's going to be like super chill and just honest, I think it breaks down a lot of walls with men. And then they'd be willing to open up a little bit more, because I would almost guarantee you, if you asked 10 men that were bald or balding if they would like to have their hair back, I would say that all 10 men would want it back.
Right. I
haven't met one that was like, oh, yay, bald, like can't be bothered. I think there's a lot of men that are like, okay, I'm okay with this and this is the way it is. But if they were given the option, it would not be.
Yeah. And to your point, I think it's hard for men to find a safe space to have that conversation. And so it's probably refreshing when they get to talk to somebody like you who's so open about it, because I don't know a lot of guys that are at the bar sitting there having a beer and they're talking about how they feel about their hair and they feel like they can really say much about it. And so I think the guys are kind of hung out there. And that's why I'm hoping that, conversations with people like you are going to open people's eyes and people can find a safe space to hear some conversation about, what it's like having hair and how their friends react to it. How did your friends and family react to it? Was it all positive, or did you get teasing? Did you get any kind of issues with anybody?
Nobody teases me. It would not work. Yeah. No, it was all positive. It was very positive. And truth be told is your friends and family, they could be weirded out by it at first. But because of what we've seen in the media, growing up, it's all that mindset. But ultimately, what it really boils down to is, are you happy? It's cool. And then it's not an issue.
Christopher's message is a powerful one because it comes from a place of empathy. In his line of work, he often creates space for men and women to be vulnerable about their insecurities, because he understands what it feels like to want to change your life for the better, even if there's a cultural stigma that stands in the way. I really appreciate the way that he acknowledges that it's not always easy for men to find people to talk to about their appearance, and it can seem like there aren't many options out there. Hopefully, thanks to people like Christopher and conversations like this one, more men and women will feel empowered to reach out to somebody who can help them onto a path towards better confidence and self-esteem. Thanks for listening to another episode of HairPod. Check us out on HairPod on Instagram, or search HairPod on Facebook to continue the conversation. If you know somebody who could benefit from hearing this episode, we'd love it if you'd share it with them. And if you're enjoying the show, consider leaving us a rating and a review on Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast app. We also have a website, and you can check it out by going to podcast.hairclub.com. We are here to build people up and share real stories so people experiencing hair loss feel a little bit less alone. And when you share, review, and subscribe, it helps us do just that. So thanks. Until next time.